ahead and introduce our speaker, Carami from Careers CLiC. Kathy's first paid job was babysitting after school in 8th grade. She still uses skills she gained back then, taking care of children, as the executive director of Careers CLiC today. Kathy is part of a team that has connected resources from over 1,400 employers to 22,000 students and 715 teachers in 195 schools in New Hampshire and Vermont during the past 22 years, all to help the next generation prepare for life after high school. So with that, I will pass it to Kathy.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here again this week and excited to be a part of your career path as you're planning, either for you yourself as a student or possibly for your child. So I am going to pull up my slides and we will get started. There we go. So today marks, I think it's the middle of the second week of events with VSAC's College and Career Pathways. That is happening the whole month of March. And if there's something that you missed last week, most content is being recorded and you can watch it on Facebook, you can watch it on YouTube. And there's links from VSAC's website to do that. And I think I saw today that there's still 28 more live sessions to choose from coming up this month. So be sure to check that out. And today we're going to be showcasing essential skills. So talking about what skills are essential and how to highlight them. So that's a session for today. It's part of a series that we're doing. Last Wednesday, we had identifying your career interests. Can you just let me know in the chat if you happened to do last week's session, or if you watched it? You might have watched it on Facebook or watched it on YouTube. So just let me know with a yes. If you did, you can say no if you want to. Then I can see if there's anyone here who's been there. Oh, great. All right. So we have some who have attended last week. Now, each of these sessions is standalone. You don't need to attend every session, so that's fine, but they do kind of go together. Some of the content builds a little bit from previous content. So great. Oh, I'm so glad to see that some of you were here last week. And so this week, March 10th, showcasing essential skills. Next week, we'll be navigating your own career path. That's when we pull things together from identifying your interests and your skills. We're putting that together with your career path. So that will be kind of a culminating session next week. And also on March 24th, that Wednesday, we're doing an evening session from 6:30 to 7:30 for parents and guardians for supporting your teen's career search. So if you're a parent attending today, that's another good session to attend. But for students, that's a good session to recommend for your parents or guardians a little bit later this month. Okay, so we're going to get started with a warm-up poll. So in a moment, I'm going to ask Anna to pull that up, and it's really informal, and as always, there are no wrong answers, but I want to find out what you think today, your perspective is of if you have a lot of skills, if you have some skills, or if you don't have many skills. And the answers are anonymous. When Anna pops up the poll, we'll only see the results after collectively, so no one will be able to tell what you answered, so you can feel comfortable with that. So Anna, can you pop up that poll? Okay, so just go ahead and answer where you think you're at today with skills. And once we've got about 50% of you have answered, we'll wait for a few more. And adults who are participating, go ahead and answer. If you have a student that you're here today to get information for, maybe answer on behalf of what you think, where you think they're at. Okay, so I think that's pretty good, Anna, if you want to post the results. I'm going to read the results out loud because when this session is recorded, the poll results don't come up in the recording. So I have a lot of skills, 38% of you checked that. 63% of you checked that you have some skills, and 0%, none of you said you don't have many skills. I'm so glad to hear that. But sometimes we find when we work with youth, they might say, oh, I don't have many skills yet because I haven't had a job and it's hard to talk about what skills I have since I haven't done work. Well, it turns out that youth do have a lot of skills and you're gaining skills all the time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, so thank you for responding to that poll. There are 3 things we're going to try to do today. So some questions we'll pose throughout the sessions. We'll see if you can get through these by the end. What skills are critical to success after high school? And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. What skills do you already have to respond to that poll we just took? And how can you build new skills? That's like the $1 million question here. If there's skills that are important, how do you build those skills? So I wanted to mention, for the purpose of today's session, we're going to be talking about essential skills or foundational skills or critical skills, all different labels people give the set of skills we're going to talk about today. These are general skills that are important for everyone in most jobs and even some non-job settings, like managing a household, volunteering, serving in a civic capacity, like volunteering on a board, or something like that. So these skills are really general and they can transfer to all different kinds of roles that you might have or jobs. We're not going to be talking today as much about career specific or job specific skills that are very technical or specific to a single job. We may touch on that a little bit, but that's not really the focus of today's session. And I think in next week's session, when we're talking about career paths, we'll touch a little bit on how to gain skills for a specific occupation. Okay, so before we get started, I want to define the difference between skills, abilities, and knowledge, just to help with a context for what we're going to talk about today. So knowledge is understanding something through study, observation, or passed on from another person. So let me give an example. If you are, let's say you're 15, and in Vermont, you can get a learner's permit to learn how to drive. In order to get that learner's permit, you need to read the Vermont driver's manual and take a test so you can get that learner's permit. So that would be like gaining knowledge. You're reading about driving rules in Vermont. So that's how you're gaining knowledge. Ability is a quality of being able to do something. So this, if we're thinking about learning how to drive, this might be the ability to mechanically do things in the car, to use the steering wheel, to use the directional signals, to use different aspects of the car, and maybe things like hand-eye coordination. If you see something in the road, you can turn the steering wheel to avoid it. So those will be related to your abilities to do that. And then skills, what we're talking about today, are proficiencies gained through training or experience. So for driving in Vermont, you have to spend hours practicing. And I think right now in Vermont, it's 40 hours on the road during daylight plus 10 hours on the road at night. So that's where you're really building the skills and the ability to do something, and you're practicing it. So you can say, I have driving skills. You can't really say you have driving skills after you read the Vermont driver's manual, or just because you know how to turn a steering wheel, that knowledge and ability. But the skills are, you've practiced, you've shown you can do it, you have skills to drive. So we'll be talking today about skills more than knowledge or ability. Okay, so a couple of things. Earlier I said one of the questions would be, how was it phrased? It was about skills learning which skills are essential to success after high school, there is a broad range of definitions for success, and everybody, I think, really has a different definition. And at different times of your life, you can have that definition of success can change depending on what station in life you're in. But there are two things I'm going to talk about related to skills that are related to opportunities. The more skills you have, the more opportunities you can have available to you. So if you have few skills, there will be a smaller number of opportunities available to you. If you have a lot of skills, there will be more opportunities. So that can be one measure of success. If you have more skills, that you have more opportunities available to you. That means you get to choose things based on different characteristics of jobs that you're interested in. And choice can be really satisfying if you can pick something that you really want to do or like to do. So as your skills increase, the number of job opportunities goes up. Similarly, the more skills that you have, the more you can earn. And sometimes even within a job, if you get more skilled at that job, you can earn more income. Now, pay isn't necessarily the only or most important measure of success, but it's important to a lot of people. So that's why we bring it up. So the more skills that you have, the more income potential that you have, even though there are lots of other measures of success after high school. So let's dig into these essential skills. There is something commonly referred to as the 4 C's, kind of nationally, universally. These 4 C's are researched and have data behind them that both education institutions and educational leaders and employers and business leaders say that these 4 skills that all start with the letter C are really what make up the essential skills that are applicable, transferable, critical, foundational to many, many jobs for most people. So can you give a guess in the chat and see if you can guess one of the C skills? If you've ever heard these before, what might be a group of skills that starts with a C? So I'll give you a few seconds to try that in the chat. Communication, perfect. I love it when they're in order with my slide. So great, yes, communication is one of those. And I should mention, you can go ahead and keep guessing to see if you can figure out the other 3 C's. I should mention that these are really categories of skills. There's a lot of individual skills that are within the communication skill category. So things like oral communication, written communication, being able to communicate instructions or technological things, or being able to do public speaking is a type of communication. So there's all different kinds of communication skills. So collaboration, that is another great skill, also in order here, that I had on my slide, so thank you. So collaboration is kind of a big word for teamwork. It's being able to work with others effectively, and there's also a lot of skills within collaboration. It might be being able to lead a group on a project. It might be able to delegate different duties, or there's a lot of communication aspects that can go into teamwork and collaboration as well. Being able to figure out what your role is and how to contribute. So there's a lot of different aspects to collaboration, but we know that in today's world and today's workplace, there is a lot of collaboration. So it's a big need. So any guesses at the others? The next one that I have up on my slide is one of my favorites, that it's a critical skill. Sometimes the word is often used to refer to people who might be artistic. They might come up with clever ideas. They may be able to look at things in different ways. They can listen to people and generate ideas based on what they're hearing to maybe address something a little differently. So I don't know if you can think of what that Yes. So thank you so much. Took a little bit to pull that out, but creativity, I just love that creativity is one of the 4 Cs. That basically workplaces are saying we need people who are creative. They can figure out creative and unique solutions to problems, or they can look at things in different ways. They might say like thinking out of the box, things like that, looking for a lot of creativity. And interestingly, a lot of people like being creative. So it's kind of a win-win, that it's a sought after skill, applicable to many jobs, and people often like using their creativity. So the last C word, it's actually 2 words. The first word starts with a C. This is more about, it's hard to talk about without using either of the words, but this would be more about using different reasoning skills. If you have a really complex problem, you might take in a lot of information and figure out how to use it effectively to maybe solve a problem or figure out a solution for something. So thank you. Critical thinking. Perfect. So those are 4 Cs: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Lots of individual skills within each of these categories, but these are the key categories. Now, I want to give a quick example and maybe have you thinking about yourself and skills you might have in this area. And we'll find out a little bit about that. So let's say you are looking at different ways that you have gained skills and thinking about things you do maybe for fun, things you might do as a hobby, things you might do in school. Just kind of like think about all the different experiences you've had, whether they are work related or not, and think about how you might be gaining some of these skills in the 4 Cs. So one example I like to share is if you have a YouTube channel and you create content for that YouTube channel, it may seem like if you're in high school that this is for fun, and it's a hobby, something you like to do, but really you can gain skills in all of the 4 Cs by using your creativity to come up with content that other people will find interesting and want to watch. Using communication, you're probably using written communication. You may be talking, public speaking, you may be narrating, you may be communicating things in your descriptions, your keywords, things like that, knowing how to communicate really effectively. Collaboration, a lot of YouTube content is created collaboratively where there's more than one person working on it. So there's a lot of opportunities to gain skills there. You might have someone running a camera, you may have someone editing, you may have someone working on music. So it could be a team effort, not always, but it could be. And then critical thinking. There are so many technical aspects of YouTube channels and analytics and different things that you need to figure out, how to use video equipment, how to edit. So there's a lot of challenges that you could come up with, and you have to figure out how to solve problems that way. So that's one example of maybe one hobby or special interest that someone could have where they could, through doing that activity and practicing a lot, they could gain skills in all of the 4 Cs. So this gives you an idea of the types of essential skills that we're talking about. Now, I would love to hear from you in the chat a little bit about yourself and skills. So the first step is gaining skills, and then you need to be able to identify what skills you have. But really important is being able to articulate that to others. So let's find out in the chat if you can share at least one skill that you already have. And it could be one of those bigger categories like the 4 Cs, or you can specify like an individual skill, what it might be. So think about that a little bit. We'll give you a little bit of time to share some examples in the chat. You can share more than one skill if you want, and you could even share how you got that skill, if that's something that you want to share, but you don't have to. So see if we can have someone who could share with us one skill that you already have. When you answered that first poll, all of you said you have some skills or a lot of skills. And adults who are in this session, you are welcome to share as well. So so we have one saying organization skills and time management. Those are two absolutely essential skills that are very important. Oh, I love it. Improv comedy. That is that's not a skill that I have, but I love watching improv comedy. That's hard to do, so neat to see that. Another one here for organization skills. And I forgot to mention Lauren Duran from Careers CLiC. She introduced herself in the chat earlier, but she's a colleague of mine, and she is here today too to help answer questions in the chat if they come up. So Lauren has a background in geology and she can identify rocks and minerals. She is a really fun person to go on a walk with in Vermont, because we hear a lot about different things that have happened to create different rocks if you're looking as you're walking. So here's another one, communication skills and relationship building. Oh, I really like that. So communication, great. Relationship building, that's excellent, especially when we're thinking about collaboration being an important skill. So here's some more. We have problem solving and team building. So I don't know if anyone wants to share how they gained some of these skills, if it was through work, if it was through school. If you're willing to share that, or if it's practicing, I'd be curious, Trish, about improv comedy, how you got that skill, if it was something that came natural to you, if you actually did training or workshops around that. But like, how do you build, Norma or Jean, how do you build organization skills? Like, where did that come to you? Is it something you grew up with? Is it something you got in a job experience? If you're able to share how you gain these skills, I would love to see a couple of examples. Okay, so we have scheduling meetings and prioritizing events. I think those are more example. So for the improv comedy, I just got a message here that says it was classes, so that's great. Learning from my mistakes, LOL, is another example. That is actually, I wasn't planning to talk about that today, but that is so important. You know what they say about being able to learn from mistakes. You definitely can gain skills that way as well. So just be thinking a little bit about that. And coming up in a few minutes, we'll talk more, not only how to identify those skills, but maybe acknowledging how you gain those skills, because I think that will help you with building new skills, which is our last question today that we want to answer. So if you can look at what skills you already have, learn how to talk about them with others, and identify how you gain those skills, it will help you with gaining new skills that you might have as goals. I'm receiving another message here that says, organization communication skills learned from student council and work projects and other classes. So there's all different ways to learn these skills. Now, I don't know if you've ever thought of this, or if you've put time into this, or if you've talked with anyone about it, but the second thing I want you to think about is one skill that you want to work on. And that could be something that maybe you just know is something that you're not as good at. It might not be a strength of yours and it's a skill you want to get, or maybe it's just something you've never experienced much or encountered and you know it's important and you'd like to have that skill. Maybe it would serve a specific purpose of something you're interested in doing or trying, and you know you need a certain skill to be able to do that. Or maybe it's something someone else has let you know, like, I think this is a skill it would be helpful if you worked on. That's okay too. So here are some examples. I have organization is a skill that Dylan wants to build. I have another message that came into me directly that says becoming fluent in other languages. So that's a great skill goal. And hopefully you have some ideas on how you can do that. Another one is learning more technology for virtual activities. So that's a really timely goal for gaining a skill. So in addition to being able to kind of take inventory of what skills you have, being able to figure out what skills you want to have is just as important. And there are all sorts of ways to gain skills. So that's what we're going to talk about next. How can you build new skills? So we've already talked about some things and some people gave us examples too. But I want to see if you can brainstorm. If there's a skill goal you have an objective of gaining a specific skill, either on your own initiative, maybe you want to build your resume for applying for a job. Maybe it has to do with something someone else has talked to you about that would be an important skill to build. Where do you go? What do you do when you want to build a skill? What are some options that are available to people? Can you help us out in the chat? And maybe we can brainstorm a few ideas. I brought a list with me that I can share, but every time I talk about this with a group, I find new ideas when people share them. So I'd love to hear what ideas you have for gaining skills. Where do you go? If you want to become fluent in other languages, for example, where do you go to get those skills? If you want to learn more technology. So YouTube, that is so great. I attended a workshop a couple of weeks ago and found out that basically right now, Generation Z is using YouTube to gain a lot of skills. I'm not in Generation Z and I use YouTube to gain a lot of skills, but you can learn how to cook things, fix things. My husband just watched a YouTube video to replace a third brake light assembly in my car the other day, and he saved $600 by watching YouTube video, putting it in himself. So podcasts, oh, there are so many great podcasts out there where you can learn all sorts of things. Any other ideas? Let's say you're in high school and this time of year, probably you're choosing courses for next year. There are a lot of, every single class that you could possibly take in high school is going to teach you some skills and give you opportunities to practice those skills like communication or technology, all sorts of things. So don't forget to think about classes, high school classes, and where you're gaining those skills and proficiencies. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but don't forget to think about that. So for the list that I brought with me today, jobs, every time you work a part-time job, a paid job, Anna mentioned in my intro that my first job was babysitting. Some people don't think of that as a job, but I started babysitting in 8th grade after school and learned so many skills. And I reflect back on those skills all the time. I ended up counting that from middle school to high school, I babysat for 36 different children in different families. I lived in a neighborhood where all the homes were really close and the teenagers all babysat for the younger children. So jobs, think about those jobs and what skills you're gaining. And you can even have objectives to gain certain skills and ask if you can have certain tasks to help build those. Close to a job would be an internship. If you're in high school, you can talk to a work-based learning coordinator or a school counselor or a teacher about doing an internship and gain all sorts of skills that way. Internships are usually about building skills, so that's a very direct experience to gain skills. But also think about volunteering, or if you're doing service learning. I don't know if any of you are doing volunteer work right now, if you have, or if you want to. Volunteering is a great way to gain skills. Sometimes you think when you're volunteering, you're giving, but a lot of times you're gaining a lot by volunteering, and there are skills you can gain there. We talked on my list is classroom learning. So think about those classes that you have available to you. Now, those could be classes in high school, but there's also a lot of classes you can take outside of high school. There's opportunities for free classes. Some classes you have to pay for. They might be online. Right now, a lot of things are online, but there might be classes that you can take at a community college or classes at a local organization. So that's something to think about too, classes both inside of your school and classes that might be available outside of your school. And you can ask around to find out about those. Nobody mentioned sports, but there are a lot of skills that you learn in sports. There are physical skills and the skills related to the sport itself, but there's a lot of teamwork and collaboration skills, a lot of communication skills between you and your teammates and your coach. So there are so many skills that can be gained in sports. So think about that as well. If you play a sport for competition or maybe for fun, that is another thing to think about. What skills are you learning while you're playing that sport? Things like crafts and hobbies and clubs. You might do a 4-H event, for example. 4-H is very skills focused. So even things that seem like you might be doing them for fun or on an elective basis, you can learn a lot of skills there. So there's a lot of places to look for skills. And if you're kind of stumped, if there's a certain skill you want to build or get better at, ask around, ask adults, people in your school, people in your family, neighbors, parents of friends, because there's bound to be someone who has an example or an idea or knows of a source for something that can help you. But of course, you can always look it up on the internet and check for it on YouTube as well. There's all sorts of things you can learn there if all else fails. Now, before we go on, I want to mention a little bit. We talked about the ability to talk to others about your skills. So you can identify the skills you have. You can figure out ways to gain new skills. What's really important is to be able to talk to other people about those skills. So when you're thinking about your career planning, which this workshop is a part of thinking about your career planning, how do you talk to others about those skills? So ways you might have to talk to people about skills, it might come up if you are applying for a job. So let's say you are writing a cover letter and you are putting together a resume and you're getting ready for an interview for a job. Those are 3 opportunities: the cover letter, the resume, and that interview, where you can talk about your skills in different ways. And if somebody says, like, what kind of communication skills you have, and you're stumped and you don't know what to say, or you say, well, not really many, I've never worked in this field before, that is really shortchanging yourself, because chances are you have a lot of communication skills. So you really need to think about how to articulate those to others after you've identified them. So Lauren is putting into the chat some really neat resources VSAC has, a part of the college and career pathways events. If you go to that website for VSAC that lists all of the events, there's one section that says, I think it says videos and guided questions. And if you click on that, you get a lot. Lauren just put a link directly there to the intro to resume writing. So what that link takes you to is it's video clips with questions. So you watch a really short video clip and then you answer a question. And that resume writing workshop takes you through how to articulate your skills, mostly in this case in writing, because you're doing it as a part of a resume. And then if someone that you're applying for a job for looks at your resume and they like what they see, they like how you articulate your experiences and your skills, they might ask you to do an interview. And also on VSAC's website is another resource called Interviewing Success Strategies. And again, if you click on that link, you'll be taken to some Google Slides, and there are short video clips with guided questions that help you learn how to articulate those skills when you're having a live interview with someone. So keep in mind, figure out how to identify what skills you have, what are you already good at, what skills you want to get better at, and how can you gain those skills? Where can you look to find ways to do that? And then how do you talk to it? How do you talk about your skills to other people, either in informal settings or when you're formally writing a resume and a cover letter and getting ready for an interview. So you can also practice that with people you know, so that if someone in an interview says, tell me a little bit about your skills, your strengths, what are you good at? It might be helpful to practice with someone first, a friend, a parent, a teacher, whoever it might be, who you can practice talking about yourself. Okay, so thank you, Lauren, for posting those links there, and I recommend checking those out. You can click on them and bookmark them for later. Now, one thing I want to mention in Vermont, if you're a student in a Vermont high school, or if you have a student in a Vermont high school, Vermont has something called proficiency-based graduation requirements. And you might remember at the beginning of our session, we had those three definitions: knowledge, abilities, and skills. And in the skills definition, it said proficiencies. So Vermont actually has proficiency-based graduation requirements where they have a set of 5 categories, very similar to the 4 C's, but there's 5 and they don't all start with C, that are specific to transferable skills. That's what Vermont calls them, transferable skills. Today we're calling them essential skills. Vermont calls them transferable skills because you can learn these skills and transfer them to many different roles, many different jobs or aspects of your life. So in those transferable skills, we have clear and effective communication. There's one of our C words. Self-direction. That one was not mentioned in the 4 C's and is really interesting that Vermont has added this. So this is basically the ability to take your own initiative to do things and follow through with things. So this is considered an area that Vermont wants to make sure high school graduates have skills in self-direction. Creative and practical problem solving. There's another one of our C words. Responsible and involved citizenship. That could have been one of the C words. And informed and integrative thinking. So that's really like that critical thinking, one of our C words, just listed differently. So I wanted to share this with you because I don't know if you're in a Vermont high school, if you know this, that these are areas that Vermont is basically saying to high schools, all students need to graduate from high school with a certain number of years of core content classes in science and language arts and math, all those important school subjects, but also that you need to graduate from high school showing that you're proficient in these 5 areas of transferable skills. So to me, this is really interesting because we're talking about skills, and here Vermont is saying you need to graduate with some of these skills. So this is an example of how Vermont high schools can look at performance, of how proficient you might be in these skills. I just want to share this with you. It's a little, it might look a little complicated, so I'm going to explain it. But this is so interesting to me that here's an example of how the Vermont Agency of Education says schools can help identify how proficient a student is in these transferable skills. So this is one of the indicators, the first column here. C, it says, there are many of these. I just pulled one out as an example for today. It says integrate information gathered from active speaking and listening. That is an indicator that Vermont says high school students need to have some level of proficiency in before they graduate from high school. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. So here are some suggested ways to rank this for students. So you would be considered beginning if you can gather information from discussions or other audio-visual or in-person sources. That means you're at the beginning of this indicator. So you'd be considered developing, a little closer to proficient, if you can use that relevant information. So you're beginning if you can gather it, you're developing if you can use it. And you'd be considered proficient if not only can you gather it and not only can you use it, but you can also integrate it. You can take that information and use it and integrate it into something else. And you'd be considering beyond proficient, expanding. You're going even further if you can then synthesize or connect information from multiple discussions. So you can gather, use, integrate, and then you can further that by synthesizing it from multiple sources. So that's just a more, it's like a deeper look at skills development and achievement and how you can say how good you are. So earlier, a lot of you shared with me skills that you're already good at, skills you already have. So you might also want to think about, where are you on that spectrum? If you say you have good organization skills, are you kind of like all the way proficient and you don't need to build that skill anymore? Or are you kind of in the middle? You're pretty good at it, but you want to get a little better. So each of these skills you can think about that with. And if you're thinking about learning foreign languages, you might think of where you are with that. Can you read a foreign language well? Can you speak it well? Can you listen when people are fluently talking fast? Can you fluently speak at a normal rate? So those will be all different ways to look at how proficient you are with that foreign language as well. Okay. So I'm going to ask Anna if she would be able to, in a moment, we're going to do the same poll that we did at the beginning. We're going to do it again. And I just want you to answer it again. It may end up the same, but it may end up different. So I'm just curious, now that we've talked about skills a little more and you've all identified some examples of skills you already have and skills you want to build, if we can take, I'm curious to see if it stays the same. So same exact questions. I have a lot of skills. I have some skills. I don't have many skills. You can answer the same as you did the first time when Anna puts up the poll, or you can change your mind and answer differently. So we'll take a look at that. So the poll is up. So just take a moment to answer that. Okay, so we have just over half of you. So if you want a few more, want to try to answer so we can get a few more. Okay. Well, this is interesting. If we could end the poll now, or if, there we go. Okay, so Anna ended the poll, so you can see the results. If 50-50 this time. So it's a little different than last time because I think it was like 38% said you had a lot of skills. I didn't write it down, so I don't know if that's exactly right, but it definitely wasn't as many as 50%. And still we have 0% for I don't have many skills. So it's just interesting if you can think about what your skills are. Be sure not to shortchange yourself, and learn how to identify those skills you already have and how to articulate that to others, and then figure out how to build those skills. So the last thing that I have for you today, and then we'll have time for questions, or if you want to share more, is where you can go for help. We talked a lot in that level up slide about how you can build skills. So some of those may be places you can go for help, but not necessarily. So I have Ask an Expert, and an expert isn't necessarily someone labeled as an expert, but a lot of people can be expert on skills if they're good at them and if they've done a lot with them. Can you share in the chat where you might go, and then I'll share my list? Like, where might you go to get help on either figuring out what skills you already have? Sometimes it's helpful to have someone talk about that with you, because sometimes other people can see skills you have that you don't necessarily know you have. I know that's happened to me before, where people notice things about working with you, or having a teacher might notice things about having you in their class that you don't necessarily notice. So who could you go to talk about what skills you have, how to talk about those skills with others, or how to build new skills? So if you have any ideas, put them in the chat. Family, I love that. I'm going to pull up my list while you're Okay, so we have school counselor, absolutely. Teachers or counselors, thank you. So these could be people that you have pretty easy access to. They're all around you. Your family, for example, you might not think of having that conversation with a family member, but you certainly can. So I have a parent, a neighbor, or a friend. Sometimes you can go to parents or other family members for certain things, but you might have someone living near you who you know well that you can talk to, or a friend, or a parent of a friend, or a sibling, or another family member of a friend. So reach out to those people you know. You can have some really good conversations about skills. School counselors and teachers, absolutely, they're a great resource. If you're in high school, you should have easy access to them. But also, if your school has a work-based learning coordinator, this is someone who might coordinate internships or teach a career readiness class. Those people are highly trained in helping students develop essential or transferable skills. So that's a really good resource if you have someone who is in that role in your school. Most high schools in Vermont do have someone in that role. They might not have the position title of work-based learning coordinator. It might be flexible pathways coordinators, which Lauren said just today. I saw a high school staff had a title of pathways coordinator. So there are all different people who could be in positions like that in your schools who could help you. A youth group leader, if you are in any kind of youth group, 4-H, Big Brothers Big Sisters, different kinds of groups and organizations in your communities, those youth group leaders often have lots of resources. If you're in a mentoring program, I didn't put a mentor down here, but if you have a mentor or work with a mentor, that could be a great person. And then the last thing I put on my list was the Vermont Department of Labor. That's what DOL stands for. They have career resource centers around the state. There's one in every region of the state. They are right now closed for in-person visits, but they are still doing virtual visits, and you can call them. But they have people there who are trained in helping with identifying skills and building skills and knowing what skills are needed, including career specific and job specific skills. And they work with both youth and adults. So that can be a great resource for you there. In addition to asking around and talking to people, as you know, you can do a lot of research on your own. So you can do online research, you can search those YouTube videos, there's articles, there's blogs, there's all sorts of things about skills. If you just type in essential skills or transferable skills or youth skill development, whatever it might be, you'll find all sorts of resources. So you can check them out. I also put a link for myskillsmyfuture.org. This is a website that talks a lot about finding jobs. But one thing that they do is they look at skills you have and interests you have, and they help find jobs that are related. For example, jobs that focus on the same skills. So if you know what skills are the strongest for you, you could do some skills-based occupation searching on that website. So I just shared that here as one example, but there's lots of others out there. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And I will mention for next week's session, we will connect the conversation we had last week about interests with the conversation we had this week about skills, and we'll start looking at career paths and job opportunities and some data around jobs. What jobs pay, how many openings there are, what education or training you need for those. So we'll start actually looking at the pathway to those jobs, but we want to connect it to your own interests and skills you have or skills building that you want to do. So that's what we'll do next Wednesday. Okay, so if anyone has questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. And Anna, I don't know if you have anything else, if there's anything that I missed that you want me to mention or anything that you want to mention.
Sure. I did just put in the chat just to let everyone know that we are doing weekly drawings as part of the College and Career Pathways, and you get one entry for every one of these events that you attend. So don't forget to enter if you are interested. We are picking 4 winners for $50 Visa gift cards each week. So I put the link in the chat to enter that if you are interested.
Right, so that's a bonus. So you can do that. You can click on that link and do that. Don't forget to check out some of those resources, those video clips that I mentioned with the guided questions. They are, I think maybe they take around an hour to do. They're free, they're accessible, they're really doable, just because they're short video clips with questions that you can ask about yourself to do some of this thinking. It's nice to have a workshop you can attend, but that's really doing some individual work, thinking specifically about yourself when you answer those questions. So be sure to check those out as well.
Right. Well, I guess if there's no other questions, we will let you all go. Thank you so much for joining us. As Kathy mentioned, we do have a number of other live sessions going on throughout the month, so definitely check them out on our webpage, and we will see you at the next one. Thanks.